Okay, part 4, everybody. Better Grades Committee. The candidates have all agreed to become your retainers, my lady. They are already being moved into their rooms. You will be meeting with the boys during the announcement after dinner, since they can't come up here, Riarda said, having returned from speaking to all the candidates. Those selected to be my retainers needed to move into rooms specifically for retainers, and with things suddenly sounding a lot busier outside my door, I can imagine this was already taking place. Lady Rosemine, may I allow your retainers in? Angelica asked, standing by the door. You certainly may. Once the door was opened, my new retainers stepped inside. The girls had come to greet me and discuss their upcoming work while their attendants and servants moved their things for them. Brunhilde, came over first and knelt before me. Lady Rosemine, I am ever so delighted that you selected me. You may count on me to make your trends fashionable. Hang on. Yeah, that's supposed to be okay. Indeed, I intend to rely on you quite heavily when it comes to social matters, Brunhilde. As you know, I was asleep for 2 years. I do not know the precise details of country-wide politics, nor the relationships between duchies and their various factions. I will be trusting you to gather information and provide support when I am to socialize. Laisletta was the next to quietly kneel before me. You saved my older sister when she was about to fail her studies, Lady Rosemine. My family, no, my entire house, is infinitely grateful. I will do all that I can to make your life here as comfortable as possible. Angelica has told me that you declined every other offer you received, deliberately waiting for me to awaken so that you could serve me, I replied. The strength of your feelings fills me with true joy. I look forward to having you in my service. Unlike apprentice scholars, who can begin work at once by making study guides and assisting with assignments as long as they know how to write, attendants needed to spend a full year honing their skills before exclusively serving anyone. This was to minimize the risk of them greatly displeasing their charge. Laisletta had been a first year when I was baptized and had hoped to serve me when she finished polishing her skills, but unfortunate circumstances had resulted in me getting attacked and put into a coma right as she finished her year of training. The dreadful timing had caused her to stagger in disbelief, but seeing Angelica steadily continue to grow stronger while I was asleep encouraged her to train even harder for my sake. Milady, I will teach the 2 apprentice attendants what work needs to be done here, Riarda said. I gave her a nod and she began running them through my daily schedule and such. It would most probably be safe to leave the 2 girls to Riarda's capable hands, so I turned my attention to the kneeling guard knights. Judith was looking up at me with a giddy expression. I can't believe I get to serve you, Lady Rosemine. I'm going to get as strong as I can. That way I can be of as much use to you as possible. I look forward to seeing your efforts firsthand, Judith. Kneeling next to her was Lenore, a girl with violet hair and indigo eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She seemed quite mature to me, perhaps due to the calm air she exuded or her well-developed body. I would never have guessed from looking at her that she was an apprentice knight. In terms of appearance, she looked a lot more like an apprentice scholar to me. Lady Rosemine, I am ever so grateful that you have taken me as your guard knight. Lenore, I am aware that you have asked whenever necessary, so I ask that you work with Cornelius to guide and support both Angelica and Judith. She glanced over at Angelica and Judith, then nodded with a stiff expression. All that I can. I sighed in relief, having thought that she might refuse. Angelica looked just as relieved. There was a broad smile spread across her face, no doubt due to her now having someone to think in her place. Angelica, tell these 2 what their duties will be, I said. Understood. No matter how bad her explanations were, Stenlick would probably pull through for me. That said, we still needed to formulate some sort of plan to reverse the damage done to her thinking patterns, or rather the lack thereof. As I pursed my lips in thought, Feline hesitantly stepped forward and knelt. Lady Rosemine, I am happy beyond words to have been taken as your retainer, but are you truly okay with having a first-year lay scholar in your service, she asked, a nervous look on her face. I can understand why she was worried, considering how rare it was for a member of the archducal family to take on a lay noble as a retainer, but Feline was the only person who had vowed to collect stories from all over the country for my sake. She was a true comrade. My only expectation, Feline, is that you continue gathering stories. I will also have an arch-noble scholar here to support and guide you. If you ever find that someone is treating you unfairly for being a lay noble, please consult me at once. I will take care of them. Thank you ever so much, Lady Rosemine. As my retainers were busy discussing work matters among themselves, I took the opportunity to mention the Better Grades Committee to Feline. What is the Better Grades Committee? She asked. I have been ordered by Ob Ehrenfest to increase the duchy's overall grades, coinciding with the Archduke candidates enrolling in the academy. It is now my duty to raise everyone's grades while I am attending school, and this committee shall serve as a tool to accomplish that. Wolford and I will of course be the presidents of the committee, but every student from Ehrenfest shall be a member. I will not let a single person escape. With that, I spread out a number of documents about the Royal Academy that Daniel had gathered for me. There were 21 duchies, including the sovereignty. Ehrenfest had ranked 13th last year, and we were just barely hovering around the middle, but in the past it had been competing with lesser duchies for last place. Ooh. Our ranking had gone up a little while Ferdinand was attending the academy, but it then plummeted back down as soon as he graduated. In other words, having a single genius wasn't enough. We needed to create a system that would increase Ehrenfest's grades permanently. I've heard from the senior students that Ehrenfest's grade average has risen considerably thanks to the karate and picture books, but what can we do to raise it further, Feline asked. The karate and picture books have shown results only among the younger students. The material they cover isn't complicated enough to have an impact on older students. In addition to this, it seemed the younger students' grades had only increased in written lessons. One could perhaps say they had gotten a little better at their practical music lessons as well, but that was about it. The growth we had seen so far was mainly just because they had been so bad before, meaning there was still much room for improvement. I am told that my brother Cornelius became an honor student during my 2-year absence. He was able to achieve this because he studied for his written lessons with Daniel a year in advance, so that he could teach Angelica, learned my efficient mana compression method, and spent time being trained by grandfather, that is, by Lord Bonifacius. With the efforts of the Raise Angelica's grades squadron had helped other apprentice knights to boost their grades a little as well, there was a clear gap between Cornelius and his peers. Angelica, meanwhile, was still just barely passing her written classes despite the tremendous efforts of so many people, which truly was a headache-inducing situation. From what I remember, you created the mana compression method yourself, didn't you? Feline asked. Yes, I intend to teach it to others once we return from the Royal Academy. I cannot teach it here and now, as it requires both a sizable sum of money and the permission of Ehrenfest's leaders. If you wish to learn it, I recommend gathering stories and information now so that I can pay you for it all at a later date. I will readily buy stories from other duchies. Feline's grass-green eyes sparkled at my words. I'll do my best. It's nice that I have time to earn money, but waiting until we return to Ehrenfest means I won't get more mana right away, doesn't it? Indeed, for now we will focus on improving everyone's written lesson grades instead. First and second years in the Royal Academy all attended the same classes when they were taught the fundamentals of various subjects, while third years and beyond narrowed their focus down to specific courses. Ferdinand had already beaten all the contents for the first and second year written lessons into my head, since he had instructed me to pass their exams on my very first day. Ferdinand had gotten me to make those preparations for good reason. I needed to know the information covered during the first 2 years at the Royal Academy just to have basic conversations with archnobles at tea parties. And I was told that Wolfried had been working hard as well for this very same reason. It was also apparently common practice for the Archduke candidates and archnobles with elder siblings to pass their exams on their first day. Though as these exams only covered the written portion of our studies, we couldn't just relax once they were over. We would still need to focus the rest of our time on practical lessons and socializing. I wanted to dedicate as much of my time as possible to the library, and the only way I could achieve that goal was by setting things up so that everyone could study while I was away reading. The current students all had studied with cards and picture books, so they wouldn't encounter any issues with magecraft and theology until the third year, nor would they struggle with math. Our biggest problems were with history and geography, since they were areas where some people were significantly better or worse than others. There were also the subjects I knew the least about myself. Many students with older siblings rely on study guides and the like that are passed down to them. No, I wish to make similar guides myself and create an environment in which everyone studies together to boost their grades. We had documents from when Eckert was an apprentice knight, and if Cornelius lent them out, everyone would make great deals of progress together. If we repeated this process for other courses as well, studying would instantly become a lot easier. We're going to raise the grades of every student from Ehrenfest, including the children from the former Veronica faction, I explained. Back when you led the playroom, Lady Rosemine, all of us worked together regardless of age and faction to complete the work given to us, hoping to be rewarded with your sweets. I truly did love the energy in the air, Feline said with a nostalgic smile. As it turned out, Wolfried had been so shocked by his friends betraying him at the hunting tournament and subsequently being attacked in the castle that he had started acting hostile toward the children of the former Veronica faction while I was asleep. He may have looked calm on the surface now, but that was only because Charlotte had taught him to not show his emotions so openly. The former Veronica faction remained ostracized to this day, and for this reason they were neither taken as retainers nor given any important duties. That needed to be fixed and fast. I wanted to recreate the atmosphere from the playroom that Feline loved so much here in the Royal Academy. I think making everyone compete for rewards again is probably the best move. Maybe all this is internal strife will fade if we can establish an outside enemy for everyone to focus on. Oh, yes. Yes. Please remain here after dinner, I said to everyone gathered in the dining hall. I will announce my retainers, pay those who provided information while I was asleep, then convey a message directly from Ehrenfest himself. With that, I took my seat. The tables were generally divided into factions. Wilfred and I were sitting with our retainers at a large table with a dozen seats, while everyone else was split between 4 large tables with their friends. It's kind of funny that we're bothering to announce my retainers when it's already obvious to everyone who I've chosen. O mighty King and Queen of the endless skies, who doth grace us with thousands upon thousands of lives to consume, O mighty eternal Five, who rule the mortal realm, I offer thanks and prayers to thee, and do take part in the meal so graciously provided, Wilfred said, leading the prayer. When that was done, we finally started eating. Incidentally, Wilfred and I had slightly different menus from everyone else, with both of us getting unique desserts. I could see the others glancing at our plates with wide-eyed surprise. The food here has been getting better over the years, but this year is something else entirely, said one of the students. Yeah, the food is what I look forward to most at the Royal Academy. I was at a loss for words the first time I ate here, replied another. The quality of the food had been steadily rising over the past 3 years due to the dormitories having chefs sent from the castle, and now that Hugo and Ella were here, the quality had shot up even further. It was funny seeing how much of the perspective of the senior students who knew how the food had been before differed from those of the newer students who were only familiar with those high-quality meals. These fantastic dishes were made by my personal chefs, who have been sent here for the first time this year. They have trained very hard over the past few years, I announced. Oh, and I plan to release a recipe book containing these foods at the end of winter. Oh my, did you mean to say that book will contain instructions for how to make these dishes? Brunhilde asked, elegantly placing a hand over her mouth to indicate surprise. I needed to learn from her example. It'll be more expensive than the picture books, but I believe the recipes are worth every coin. You are certainly right about that, Lady Rosemine. Recipes are very expensive. Will you also be selling them in the Sovereignty? My plan is to sell a recipe book in the Royal Academy next year, or perhaps the year after that. This year I will only be debuting a single sweet recipe or two in order to build up anticipation. Trying to change trends too abruptly will only inspire resistance, I said. This earned me a small pout from Brunhilde, who wanted to spread these trends faster than anyone. She was an elegant and mature girl, but she really did look her age when she made expressions like that. It's best to introduce trends gradually, I explained with a smile. While I'm an Archduke candidate, other duchies have their own Archduke candidates as well. If we consider the sovereignty royalty and the Archduke candidates of greater duchies to be archnobles, then we of a middle duchy like Ehrenfest will be equivalent to men nobles. Now tell me, what would archnobles think of men nobles abruptly starting new trends without any warning? Brunhilde gasped in realization. We must move like men nobles. The inventions and such that we can introduce as trends are our secret weapons for introducing connections with the archnobles and increasing our influence. There is no need for us to reveal all our cards at once. We are better off showing our hand little by little. It is as you say. After dinner, it was time for me to reveal my new retainers. Everyone already knew who I had chosen, given that they had just eaten with me, but official announcements like this were apparently important. I shall now announce my retainers. My apprentice attendants shall be Leisleda and Brunhilde. My apprentice knights shall be Angelica Cornelius, Lenore, Traugott, and Judith. My apprentice scholars shall be Hartmut and Feline. I had already spoken to the girls back in my room, but this was pretty much my first time seeing the boys. We had exchanged our first greetings 3 years ago at the playroom, but in all honesty, I had greeted so many people back then that I couldn't remember anyone who hadn't been on the blacklist I had memorized. It is an honor to serve you, Lady Rosemine, Traugott said while kneeling before me. He was a 12-year-old apprentice arch-knight in his 3rd year, and despite being both Riarda's and Boniface's grandson, he didn't really look like either of them. He had exceptionally blonde hair and deep blue eyes, and the silence he exuded was only further emphasized by his unmoving expression. Hartmut stepped forward after Traugott. I have been awaiting your return ever since you first instructed us to gather information in the Royal Academy, Lady Rosemine. I am overjoyed to serve you, he said, his amber eyes crinkled in a bright, peaceful smile. His way of speaking made him sound exactly like Justice. I knew it. Though his noticeably red hair meant he probably wasn't as suited to stealthy reconnaissance. He was Ardley's second son, a 14-year-old apprentice art scholar in his 5th year. Once the greetings were finished, I had Riarda bring me a pouch filled with coins. With much gratitude in my heart, I will now distribute payment to those who gathered information for me while I slept, I announced. I began calling the students over one by one, giving them each a few words of appreciation. Brunhilde in particular had earned high praise from Florencia and Elvira for the fashion and trend-related information she had gathered, while Ferdinand had been quite satisfied with the information Hartman had collected. A proud light shone in their eyes as they accepted their payment. Furthermore, Roderick and Feline have both gathered many stories at my request. It is thanks to them that I will soon be able to make yet another new picture book, I continued. While neither of them had been Royal Academy students at the time, they had still gathered information that I found valuable, so I was naturally going to pay them in full. Doing this would also encourage more people to gather new stories from me in the hopes of making some money themselves. Feline happily walked over and accepted her payment, but Roderick looked between me and the coins in his hands with worry. Is it truly acceptable for me to take this? But of course, you are being paid for your services, Roderick. He must never have expected for his efforts to be recognized or rewarded, as his face momentarily scrunched up like he was about to cry. I look forward to your continued efforts. Please find many stories from me in the Royal Academy. As you wish, I will live up to your expectations without fail, he replied, gripping the coins tightly as he returned to his seat. Wolfried watched him go, then looked at me with narrowed eyes. Rosamond, do you not know? Roderick was, it's best to reward deeds fairly, dear brother. Roderick gathered many stories for my sake, and I am merely compensating him for his efforts. That is all there is to it. One's faction is irrelevant to their accomplishments and good deeds. This announcement caused a stir at the table where the children from the former Veronica faction were seated. Lady Rosamond, does that mean any information I gather will be rewarded equally as well? One asked. Of course, everyone values things differently. Brunhilde gathered information about fashion and trends, while Hartman prioritized information on interduchy relations. Not everyone found use in what they obtained, but some did. Thus, if someone appreciates the information you gather, I will reward it fairly. Nobody from the former Veronica faction had brought me any information. I had initially assumed this was because their parents had forbidden them from doing so, but as it turned out, it was because they hadn't thought their efforts would be rewarded. Given how Wilfrid had reacted to me paying Roderick, I could hardly blame them. Now, we shall convey to you all the message from Arab Ehrenfest, I began. Wilfrid and I are enrolled in the Royal Academy as Archduke candidates, and next year our sister Charlotte will be joining us. Wilfrid stood up and faced everyone, then continued in a loud, clear voice. Starting with us, Ehrenfest will have Archduke candidates in the Royal Academy for the next 10 years. My father wishes to use this opportunity to increase our duchy's influence as much as possible, so we want all of you to band together and provide your support. First, let us consider how to raise everyone's grades, I said. The apprentice knight spoke up at once. Simply being taught your mana compression method will be a significant boon. Please teach it to us so that we may raise our duchy's grades. It was clear to everyone just how drastically my mana compression method had increased the mana capacities of Angelica, Cornelius, and Ernesta, the last of whom was Charlotte's apprentice guard knight. Most important of all, it was a hot topic in the Knights Order that even Daniel, an adult lay noble, was still seeing a steady increase in his capacity. I plan to gradually teach my mana compression methods to those I deem trustworthy. I will observe your behavior over this winter and select those who catch my interest, then put these names on to Ehrenfest leaders for support or approval. When this term ends, I plan to hold seminars to teach those who are accepted. Is that true? Yes, though please keep in mind that those who are accepted will need to pay a hefty fee before they can be taught, I explained, resulting in a number of excited and defeated expressions among the students. Lessons on using the compression method to increase one's capacity will begin next spring. As for this year, my goal is to raise our written grades both for Ehrenfest and for your sake. Let us all improve together regardless of rank and faction. My words caused many to raise their heads. Some were noticeably tense about what I was going to say next. We will first split into groups, I said. The first and second years will be put together as all their lessons are shared, while the rest of you will be divided into your respective specialty courses. In summary, there will be the first-year teams, the second-year teams, the apprentice knight team, the apprentice scholar team, and the apprentice attendant team. The teams differed slightly in terms of size, but there are around 10 people in each. This is the most efficient method of dividing the students, considering my plans to have them share information and study guides, but people immediately began to complain. Rosamond, are you insane? Wilfrid explained. If you're going to put them into groups, you should at least divide them by faction. Dang it. That's right, I can never work with someone from another faction, came a voice from among the students. Lady Rosamond, please consider how those of us being ostracized feel, added a student from the former Veronica faction. It seemed that my decision wasn't much appreciated by Wilfrid, the members of my own faction, or even the members of the former Veronica faction. But I really didn't want the dormitory to be awash with faction politics. As far as I was concerned, there really was no point in caring about such distinctions here. In the midst of all the complaints, I put a hand on my cheek and shook my head, wearing the most exasperated expression I could manage. Goodness, everyone, might I ask why you all seem to love faction squabbling so much? Are you aware that the country at large considers Ehrenfest a backwater duchy without any notable merits? Is it truly wise for us to fight among ourselves in such a dire situation? That's... Rosamund, have you forgotten that you were attacked? Wolfried retorted. I couldn't help but sigh. I had been wondering why Wolfried was so invested in faction politics all of a sudden, and now it made sense. He was trying to protect me. As much as I appreciated his efforts, he was getting in the way of my plan. I have not forgotten what happened, nor am I happy about it, I said, looking over the dining hall. Even so, it is worth noting that we have no parents to rely on here in the Royal Academy, which in turn means we have no parents to spy on us and force us to commit misdeeds. The faction squabbling can wait until we return to Ehrenfest, can it not? Here, the foes we must face are the honor students of other duchies. That is what you all must understand. It is not standard practice for us nobles to consider the future, hide our emotions, and ally with our enemies to defeat yet our greater foes. This is what I was taught long ago. Goodness, to think you all are in so feeble a spirit. Wolfried and all the other children fell silent. That said, I understand that being abruptly told to study harder is not the most motivating thing in the world, I continued. For this reason, I have prepared rewards to encourage you all. The first team to have all its members pass their exams, and the team with the most talented students shall each receive my pound cake recipe, meaning you may have your chefs at home make them for you when we return to Ehrenfest. Farida had said that I could publicize the pound cake recipe, but it was still mostly a secret. I had, of course, taught it to a few people who were close to me, but they had paid so much for the recipe that they were keeping it close to their chests. As a result, those in the nobles' quarter who wanted pound cake either had to buy some at the guildmaster's store or secure an invitation to one of Elvira or Florencia's tea parties. Introducing the recipe as a reward would allow the students to eat pound cake at home, serve it to visitors, and do pretty much whatever else they wanted with it. Everyone suddenly looked a lot more receptive to the idea. That is, everyone except Wolfried and Cornelius, who still seemed unhappy. Would you two rather be rewarded with Ella's new sweets recipe, I asked. That was evidently enough to solve the problem, so they both nodded with motivated smiles. Given the easier material, I imagine the lower years will pass their exams sooner, but it is unlikely they will be selected as the most talented students for the same reason. Those in the higher years may be able to exploit this chance for victory, Hartmut mused aloud. He then shot a hand up, while eyeing Cornelius. Lady Rosamund, there are many guard knights among the apprentices who already know your mana compression method, and have access to Lord Eckert's excellent study guides. I think this gives them an unfair advantage here. The others immediately began to voice their agreement. Faction squabbling had already ceased to matter entirely. The other teams can surely acquire study guides from their own siblings, but I agree that the mana compression method does provide an unfair advantage. Some adjustments will need to be made to account for this, in which case, I forbid Angelica from using Stenlook in class. What? No way are we going to win now, several of the other older apprentice knights cried out. Angelica was similarly taken aback. Her face paled as she attempted to choke out my name, but I looked her straight in the eye and didn't back down. You have relied on Stenlook so much over the past 2 years, Angelica, but you think even less than you did before. That simply will not do. Please use your head going forward and learn on your own merits. You survived the previous 2 years. You can surely survive this one as well. Do you hate me, Lady Rosamund? Angelica asked tearfully. She was almost radiating despair, but I was unmoved. No matter how much of an ephemeral and melancholic beauty she was right now, I couldn't be deceived by appearances. She was already putting the same face she always made when she didn't want to use her brain. Of course not. I would not assign someone I hate to be my guard knight. This is all to aid your growth as a person, and I trust that you understand this as well. Stenlook, I will not tolerate any violations, I declared, having noticed Angelica touching her mana blade's face down in a desperate bid for help. Naturally, a mana blade with Ferdinand's personality and speech patterns would never in a million years permit any fraud. He responded with a clear, understood. Poor Angelica, she has to do it now. Knights must abide by the rules, Stenlook firmly continued, and most of all, I too wish for my master's growth. I am glad to see we're on the same page. No, Stenlook, Angelica cried out. Why, Lady Rosamund, why? I cheered Angelica on with a grin, then turned to look across the entire dining hall. Now then, get into your groups, come up with plans, work together, and do your best to your classes. With that established, Wolfried, when will we first years begin our strategy meeting? Wolfried, who had been staring at the table where Roderick and the other children of the former Veronica faction were, abruptly stood. Spend tonight checking over the study guides and other information you have received from your older siblings. We will hold a strategy meeting first thing after breakfast tomorrow. Victory shall be ours. And so Ehrenfest's Better Grades Committee was established with the intense battle for results beginning at once. Okay, let's see. the advancement ceremony and fellowship gatherings. Thanks to my head attendant Riarda being here, my new life in the Royal Academy wasn't all that different from my time spent in the castle. One thing I hadn't entirely gotten used to, however, was Laisletta and Brunhilde already being dressed and waiting in my room when it was time for me to get up. It really pained me knowing that I was relaxing in bed while everyone else was awake. But such was the fate of anyone who had attendance. Waking up earlier would only lead to my attendants having to get up even earlier than usual to make their morning preparations. So my only option as a high-status rich girl was to wait in bed and at best pretend to be asleep until everyone was ready. Breakfast was eaten in the dining hall rather than in my room, so once I was changed, my female retainers and I all went there together. Cornelius and the boys had already been informed that I was ready, so that by the time I climbed into Leslie and reached the second floor, they were already waiting for me. "Good morning, Lady Rosemine," they said. Once classes began, there wouldn't be time for the usual process of my retainers having to wait for me to finish my food, so we all ate at the same time. We were served by the adult attendants we had brought with us, which meant Riarda served my food for me. After our meal, I fetched the documents Ferdinand had prepared when beating the lessons into my head, then moved to the common room. There we would begin the first year's strategy meeting. I already have Riarda to attend me, and Felina is a fellow first year, so I only need one guard knight to stay with me, I said. The others can go and be with the night group, assuming they are holding a meeting as well. We may be inside the dormitory, Lady Rosemine, but it is not enough to have only one guard knight here to protect you, Cornelius said. Both he and Wilfrid were wearing clouded expressions. I will be perfectly fine here. Ferdinand gave me many protective charms. Did he? Oh, yes. They're magic tools so deadly that I genuinely feel bad for anyone who would attempt to attack me. Since I didn't have a staff, the only way I could attack anyone was by praying or getting so mad that I crushed anyone in sight. Upon hearing that the attack 2 years ago had occurred too suddenly for me to fight back, Ferdinand had given me magic tools that would absorb my mana in their own and activate the moment I was attacked. For this moment, he had told me to keep them on me at all times. I cannot say where the magic tools are, or when they will activate, since we cannot risk any plans being made to counter them. But trust me when I say that they are exactly what you would expect from Ferdinand, I explained. That alone was enough for Cornelius and Wilfrid to grimace. I can only wonder what had transpired between them and Ferdinand while I was asleep. And very well, in that case, I will entrust this duty to Lenore. "Nor Cornelius," Angelica said, stepping forward with a broad smile. "Please allow me to guard Lady Rosemine." Cornelius faced her down with an equally broad smile. "You are the one and only thing posing a threat to the night team's victory. Neither the strategy meeting nor the study group can begin without you," he said before promptly dragging her away. They might have grown in the inside, but they were still acting the same way as they had 2 years ago. I couldn't help but giggle at Judith's dazed expression as she watched Angelica getting dragged away. In an attempt to reclaim her focus, I gestured to a nearby table. "Judith, the second years have already begun their meeting." "Right, I'll be there." I had to wonder whether her saintly mental image of Angelica had just been shattered to pieces. I genuinely felt a bit sorry for her, but learning the truth sooner rather than later would save her a lot more heartache down the line. Besides, it was only studying that Angelica was bad at. Her strength was the real deal. "Do you not need to study with them?" Lenore asked. "Fear not, Cornelius has lent me his study guides, and I have already looked over all the fourth-year material." "My, you really are talented," I said, remembering how much the Angelica's grades squadron had struggled. Lenore gave a conflicted smile. "He informed me that it was all material you learned 2 years ago, Lady Rosemine. I only helped Daniel organize it so that he could teach Angelica. I certainly haven't memorized it all, and there is much I have forgotten." "Yet more humility. You truly are a modest individual, Lady Rosemine." "No, it's just the truth." It was true that I had learned a lot while participating in the Raise Angelica's Grade Squadron, but most of that knowledge was already long forgotten. That said, it had mostly covered the ways knights fought and battle strategies involving magic, so I couldn't imagine this would be much of an issue. It wasn't like battle magic would ever come up during tea parties with the duchies. "Wilfrid, what written subjects did you struggle with the most?" I asked. "History and geography. I learned everything else in the playroom, and more said I'm already good enough to pass. I think we should have everyone else focus on history and geography too, then get as much practice in with the practical subjects as we can," he said, clearly having thought up his own study plan. The main subjects were math, theology, magecraft, history, and geography, with history and geography evidently being the main problem areas. What should we expect on the practical side of things? Ferdinand was quite strict with teaching me the written subjects, but we had no time for practical exercises. First year Magecraft lessons cover mana control, mana compression, high beast creation, and stat acquisition, none of which you'll need to practice for, of course. Well, except getting a staff, of course, but other than that, she's about done everything else. There's also court etiquette, music, and the dedication world, but from what I saw in the castle, you're fine with them as well. In the shocking twist, Ferdinand had gotten me to learn most of those things 2 whole years ago. He truly had planned ahead to a fearsome degree. Am I already passing, I asked? I certainly don't feel like much of a whirler. First years don't perform public dedication whirls, so all we need to do is practice. Either way, though, I expect you are already above a passing grade to all areas. Uncle would not sit still if you were blatantly lacking in something. Wilfred was right. Ferdinand had been working hard for the sake of the future, so he would have made it painfully clear if there was a subject I wasn't doing well enough in. I had been a little worried about whether I would finish things in time for the dedication ritual, but surprisingly enough, I was now feeling a lot more confident. Okay, let's all study history and geography together until third bell, Wilfred said. Harspiel practice will begin right after. Wilfred and I divided the work, then started teaching everyone history and geography. The Archnoble already knew the material we were due to cover, but the lay nobles barely knew a thing. They hadn't been blessed with skilled tutors, and neither subject had been taught in the playroom. Feline in particular was in immensely bad spots, since she didn't have any older siblings to rely on. Let's start with basic history, I said. Yeah, Wilfred agreed. The picture book Bibles already covered a lot about the founding of the country, so this should be easy to remember. The first-year team was the smallest of all the groups, being the only ones with fewer than 10 students, and that was exactly why we were focusing on winning, through having all our members pass first. Goodness me, I see we have a passionate bunch of students this year, Professor Herscher said with a surprised expression as she walked into the common room. Despite her being our dorm supervisor, she was so busy with her work as a professor that we rarely saw her in the dormitory. Hello, Professor Herscher, I replied. I imagine you are all busy with your studies, but your attention, please, Herscher said. Tomorrow's advancement ceremony will be held in the auditorium at third bell, with the fellowship gatherings then being held concurrently with lunch. Keep in mind that Ehrenfest is ranked 13th this year. My God. She briskly left. The fact that she was prioritizing her research over managing the dormitories surely hinted at why Ferdinand was still in contact with her. No doubt she was a mad scientist as well. That is one weird professor, Wilfred muttered. The guard knight standing beside him nodded. Professor Herscher is somewhat eccentric. In previous years, however, she only ever showed her face when unlocking the dormitory at the start of the term, and then when closing it again at the end. Despite how it may seem, she is making an effort to show herself out of respect for you and Lady Rosemine. From what I know, she previously settled all business matters through ordinance. It had apparently extended to dealing with the students in her dormitory as well. Herscher would normally receive an ordinance when the new first years had gathered, and then she would rely on ordinances to inform the students of any official matters. Wilfred furrowed his brow. Herscher didn't even kneel or greet us when she first came by. What kind of Ehrenfest noble is she? That just isn't right. No, Lord Wilfred, you must remember that Professor Herscher is not an Ehrenfest noble. She has moved to the sovereignty, and so she is now a sovereign noble. Furthermore, it is well established in the Royal Academy that professors are of a higher status than students, so I do not believe you will find any professors kneeling in students on the Academy's grounds. I see. We spent our time going over the material in our groups and identifying our weakest points. From there, we just needed to work on our shortcomings and strengthen ourselves overall. Well, now we know for sure that Harspiel practice in the playroom is having a big impact, Wilfred said. Seems like even lay nobles won't have much trouble passing now, which means we should add history and geography lessons to the playroom, yeah? Yes, it sounds like a natural next step. I'll need to print picture books that can be used when studying these subjects. Professor Moritz would definitely struggle having to do it all on his own, I said, clenching my fist with determination as I thought about making new books for the children. Hold on, Wilfred said with a grin, raising a hand to stop me. If you're going to be making study materials, at least start with something we'll be able to use ourselves as second years. I can already tell you're going to make everyone study like this again next year. I nodded. It was necessary to establish a system in which everyone supported each other so that things would continue functioning even when I withdrew into the library. If our current group system went well, I would naturally be reusing it next year. Indeed, I will start with study material for the second years then. Great. Once we'd had dinner, it was time for a bath. With the advancement ceremony and fellowship gatherings being held tomorrow, I decided to thoroughly clean my hair with Rinsham. Brunhilde's eyes sparkled when I asked her to prepare it. Rinsham certainly is wonderful, isn't it? specially made, Lady Rosemine? It certainly did. The Gilberta Company made it at my request. Brunhilde turned out to be quite a regular user of Rinsham. She opened the jar of newly made product and let out a dreamy sigh as she inhaled the scent. It seemed that beauty and fashion transcended factions for women, such that all archnoble girls had started using Rinsham over the past 2 years. In that case, do you think washing the hair of all the Ehrenfest girls will draw attention to us at the ceremony and potentially kick off a trend? I asked. Brunhilde fell into thought for a moment, then nodded. I do. It is rare to see anyone with hair this glossy, after all. I imagine unobservant men will not take much notice, but it will catch the attention of other women without fail. In that case, please distribute Rinsham to the girls who don't have any. We shall all attend the advancement ceremony with clean hair. As Brunhilde and I talked, Laisletta came to call me for the bath she had just finished preparing for Yarda. I shall distribute the Rinsham for you, she said. Please take your bath, my lady. The children who were sharing rooms also shared bath water, so there wasn't much Rinsham needed in the end. Laisletta had volunteered to distribute the Rinsham among them while taking the opportunity to teach them how to use it as well. She was an observant and overall very considerate girl. It might be wise for everyone to wear hair ornaments next year as well, Brunhilde suggested, taking the long term into account now that we had decided to start spreading trends. We can have a universal design, but with a selection of colors to match people's hair. That is an excellent idea. I must ask, though, will lay nobles be able to afford ornaments the same as the ones I wear? Considering the cost, perhaps a universal design will not be so easy after all. Using the same color will certainly be a foolish misstep, though, as there is no single color that looks good on everyone. I suppose we'll have to wait until next year to think of a solution. By the time Riarda had finished bathing me, Laisletta had slowly returned. She gave me a massage, and as I sipped the fruit juice Brunhilde had prepared for me, I asked how the Rinsham distribution had gone. The girls who had never used it before were quite excited to finally try it out, Laisletta replied. You and Feline may use it as well. I look forward to seeing you both with glossy hair. As you wish. Following my bath, Feline and I studied together until it was time to sleep. Or rather, I tutored Feline while organizing study guides for the second years like Wilfried had said. We would need them next year for everyone to study together again. The sun rose on a new day, and at breakfast, the boys gawked at how the girls' hair had turned glossy and shiny overnight. Wilfried demanded to know what I had planned, and to that I simply laughed. It's just a casual statement that we're going to push a new trend. How the heck is this casual? You're going to be shoving it in their faces. I could be spreading countless other more trends, but instead I'm just going with one. That makes it casual. I am also currently figuring out how to have everyone wear matching hairpins and the like next year. On a personal level, I wanted to kick off a trend of selling and buying books, but considering the need to raise our grades, we had to keep that a secret for a bit longer. Book selling needed to wait until after the Better Grades Committee had left its mark on Ehrenfest history. For now, we could start by gradually pushing trends on beauty, fashion, and cuisine. With the Rinsham having been embraced by all women regardless of faction, I could guess that these 3 areas will be accepted by everyone across the country regardless of politics. I understand that you're thinking things through as best you can, Wilfried said, but don't do anything that'll draw too much attention. You already stand out enough because of your appearance. Fair point. We soon finished breakfast. Since we needed to head to the auditorium at third bell, I made myself presentable enough to leave the dormitory, making sure to put on my cape and brooch. I wouldn't be able to get back into the dormitory without them. Lady Rosemine, as the fellowship gatherings involve so many people, they are held separately by rank. Please select 3 guard knights, 1 scholar, and 1 attendant from your retainers, Riarda said. Wilfried and I will be attending the gathering with the other Archduke candidates and members of the royalty, so it'll probably be safest to stick with archnobles and older students who had already knew the ways of the Royal Academy. In that case, I select Angelica, Cornelius, and Lenore as my guard knights, Hartmut shall be my scholar, and Brunhilde to my attendant. As you wish. I got into my high beast like normal once our preparations were done, but Cornelius advised me to climb out again just as we were about to exit the dormitory. Though the academy grounds were overall quite massive and high beasts could be used freely outside, it was apparently against the rules to ride them in the halls. A new student riding an unfamiliar high beast on the first day would make a very poor impression, Cornelius said. You already look unusually young. You should not try to stand out any more than you already do, Wilfried added. I understand your points, but will I really be able to walk all the way to the auditorium, I asked. Surely I would stand out even more if my attendants had to carry me there. The auditorium is close enough that this won't be a problem. You shouldn't have an issue getting to classes either, given that they are initially held either in the auditorium itself or at a large nearby classrooms. If you find that this is too much for you to manage, Hartmut and I will carry you. That will stand out less than your high beast. When we were all gathered together, our primarily black clothing with identical colored capes and brooches really did make us look like a team, even with the unique styles of our clothes. The door leading out the dormitory opened and my retainer surrounded me as I started walking. The exit led not outside but into a corridor. When I looked around, I spotted another door open nearby, out of which streamed a number of children wearing black capes. Ehrenfest's dormitory is the 13th door in the corridor, one of the older students said. Please take care not to forget that. The doors to the other dormitories will of course not open for you, and your first mistake will naturally be forgiven, but if you attempt to open the wrong door too many times, you may be imprisoned on suspicion of attempted assault or intimidation. We younger students nodded with bemused looks. Our dormitory was the 13th door to match Ehrenfest's position in the rankings, which were determined by a duchy's influence and grades from the previous year. By this point, it was clear that the ranking of our duchy would have significant influence on our lives in the academy. Duchy rankings influence everything, from the order of greetings to the placement of seats, the students continued. The further we went down the corridor, the smaller the numbers on the plates above the doors became, and the more students came out of their dormitories. It seemed that we would need to cede the corridor to students of a higher rank than us, and so we waited by the door for those ahead of us to finish leaving. The capes are dark green. All the students in the academy were gathered in the auditorium, and there seemed to be about 2,000 of us in total. Ehrenfest was a middle-class duchy closer to a lesser duchy in terms of population, so we had less than 70 students. Greater duchies, meanwhile, had much larger populations, with some even having over 150 in attendance, while some of the smallest duchies didn't even have 50. We stood in our designated places and waited for the advancement ceremony to begin. I thankfully didn't stand out since I was buried among my retainers, so much so that I could only see Ehrenfest capes around me. Since we're all lined up according to our duchies, I wonder if we look like a rainbow from above. Someone began a speech that echoed throughout the auditorium. Once again is that time of year where the students who bear the future of Jürgen. Okay, that's the name of the country. The duchy's in the country. Okay. Come together to grow and develop. We would all do well to dedicate ourselves to increasing your respective duchy's influence and to being accepted as Jürgen nobles, he began. The older students were already looking exasperated, so I can imagine someone gave this same speech every year. Once the speech celebrating the advancement of years was over, announcements pertaining to the upcoming classes began. I couldn't see who was speaking, but I could hear them just fine thanks to the voice-amplifying magic tool they were using. First and second years had only shared lessons, which were all carried out here in the auditorium. There was also wherein the first years were due to take their written lessons in the morning before moving to practical lessons in different classrooms based on their status. Since there were so many people in the lower years who passed the classes during their first exam, the lectures would be moved from the auditorium to classrooms once few enough people remained. Thus ended the speeches from the teachers. The upcoming fellowship gatherings were apparently the really important part, since this was where one would socialize with students of other duchies. It was equivalent in significance to socializing back home, meaning no failures would be permitted. You will now be moved to gatherings according to your status, but take care to stay close to members of your own duchy. Seniors of all statuses, take care of your juniors. Juniors, you have much to learn, so take care and obey the wisdom of your seniors. The 6 years subsequently divided everyone into lay nobles, med nobles, arch nobles, and finally archduke candidates, who of course kept their retainers. We will be leaving the auditorium in order of our duchy rank once again, and so we waited as the massive crowd started to move. Once we had exited the auditorium, the seniors split up and took us to our respective gathering locations. We archduke candidates were taken to a small gathering hall known as the small hall rather than a massive meeting area. Lord Wilfrid and Lady Rosemine from Ehrenfest the 13th have arrived, announced a scholar standing by the door, after which we were guided into the hall. There was a table at the very front that was considerably larger than the others, so I could guess that the royalty were sitting there. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew who they were. The 5th prince had risen to kingship immediately after winning the Civil War, and his son, the 2nd prince, was currently attending school as a 6th year. His name was Anastasius, from what I remembered. Since we would only be attending the academy together for a single year, Ferdinand had said that I would almost certainly never have a meaningful interaction with him. For this reason, I only needed to memorize his name. He sure made that sound easy, but all these nobles and royals here have names that are super hard to remember. They're so long and weird sounding. Jeez. As I silently complained, I looked around the hall and saw a line of separated 4-person tables. Given that the tables closer to the front already had people sitting at them, while those toward the back were still empty. I could guess they were also determined by duchy rank. What's with that tiny girl? Came a voice. Everyone in the hall suddenly looked at me with curious eyes, with a few students here and there even making amused commentaries. I could hear Wilfred grinding his teeth. These currently here were all of a higher status than us. Speaking up to defend ourselves wasn't an option. We had to stay silent and endure it. Looks like a toddler wandered in. Anyone know where her parents are? Oh, come on. That is rude. She's not that small. Trying to ignore the sneers and mockery, I headed to my table. Brunhilde pulled a chair back for me and I sat down. Hartmut then sat beside me as my scholar while my attendants and guard knights stood behind me. From what I could see, this was also the case at the other tables. Take this, Lady Rosamund. You'll want it for the greetings, Hartmut whispered, handing me a folded sheet of paper. I glanced down and saw it was a cheat sheet detailing each duchy's color, current position in the rankings, and archduke candidates. Thank you! Dang it. I had already memorized the names of each duchy and their respective colors, but I didn't have a full grasp of the rankings or the names of the new archduke candidates, so this was very valuable information to have. You have my thanks, Hartmut. It is my honor. Your next course of action is to greet the royalty, then those of the higher-ranking archduchies. When you are done, those of the lower-ranked duchies will come to greet you. It should be clear once you observe what those who came before you do. Once all the Archduke candidates were in the hall, the doors were closed and the greetings began. The Archduke candidates from Klausenburg, a greater duchy known to have more power and influence than any other, stood up at once, their red capes fluttering behind them. Okay, Klausenburg is red. They approached the royalty with their retainers, greeted them, then returned to their seats. Next to stand were two Archduke candidates from the greater duchy, Dunkelfelger, wearing blue capes. Oh, here we go! Blue capes. Remember, Ferdinand's cape was the only blue one among all the yellow ones when the Knight's Order showed up before. So maybe his mother was from there? I don't know. It's kind of odd, though, that he had a blue cape. Because even Karstedt didn't have a blue cape, but he was the cousin to the Archduke. So the whole blue cape thing kind of made me think, wait, is he from somewhere else or something? Okay, Dunkelfelger wearing blue capes. They greeted the royalty and then Klausenburg's Archduke candidates before returning to their seats. Why is Ehrenbach ranked 6 despite being a greater duchy? I asked, looking over my cheat sheet. Hartmut frowned. Their influence has decreased over the past few years, and from what I understand, they are struggling with an inner turmoil of sorts. It is not easy for apprentice scholars to gather information about them, however, so I do not know much more than that, he replied, insinuating that it was harder for lower-ranked duchies to gather information about higher-ranked duchies. Good to know. Soon enough, the light purple capes of Ehrenbach began to move. Standing at the front was a girl with gorgeous blonde hair who I assumed was Georgine's youngest daughter. I glanced down at my cheat sheet. Uh-oh. Oh, this name, guys! I know who this is. And for those of you who actually have read the light novels or have, spoiled yourself by looking up the information, you know who this is too. Detlinde. After greeting the nobles, Detlinde glanced my way. The similarity wasn't immediately apparent due to her hair color, but her face, eyes, and other features all looked very much like Georgine's. For the briefest moment, I could have sworn our eyes met. Uh-oh. Oh, I want to continue, but how far have I gone? I'll have to cut out some edits. I'll do a little more. Royalty and nobles from other duchies. When there was more than one archduke candidate present for a particular duchy, they all went up together during the greeting, while duchies without any sent an arch-noble student of the highest year. I observed the process and absorbed the unwritten laws until it was eventually Ehrenfest's turn. Wolfried stood up at once, but Brunhilde had to help me down from my chair. Look, she can't even get up on her own. Oh, shut up! Quiet snickering can be heard from among the other students. Wilfrid wore a stiff expression as he tried to endure them, but the way his fists were clenched told me the whispers were getting to him a bit more than they were me. I guess that makes sense. He's not at all used to being insulted. I had been called tiny ever since my commoner days, and nobles had used their status to insult me on numerous occasions in the past. It was one thing to be insulted by people I knew, but strangers? That didn't bother me in the least. I was used to it, but the same couldn't be said for Wilfrid. Wilfrid, I care not what strangers have to say about me. I know that I have many friends and allies by my side, I whispered, placing a hand on his bald fist. Our retainers gave small nods. Right. Let's go, Rosemine. Still wearing a hard expression, Wilfrid matched my walking speed as we headed straight to the royalties table with our retainers. I moved as gracefully as I could, making sure to keep my back straight, a smile on my face, and my eyes forward. These instructions had been so thoroughly beaten into me that walking gracefully with a fake smile was now like second nature to me. Well, that's a good thing! We knelt in front of the royalties table, crossed our arms in front of our chests, hung our heads, and then spoke the traditional greeting used when meeting someone for the first time. The prince gave a slight nod of recognition in response, regarding us with beautiful gray eyes that were completely unobscured by his regal blonde hair. Back in Ehrenfest, I had muttered something about how disappointed I would be if the prince turned out to be ugly. A Ferdinand had assured me that those of such high status were generally very attractive, as only the most beautiful of women were taken as wives. Okay, good to know. The sight before me pretty much confirmed that he was right. Surely one had to have come from a long line of stunning people to end up looking like this. Prince Anastasius, may we pray for a blessing and appreciation of this serendipitous meeting ordained by the harsh judgment of Abigail, the god of life. You may. He replied as expected, and so Wilfrid and I poured mana into our rings to give a blessing. I put in just the tiniest amount so as to not overdo it. Perfect. I let out a relieved sigh at the fact my blessing hadn't been any larger than Wilfrid's before continuing the greeting. It is an honor to meet you, Prince Anastasius. We are Wilfrid and Rosemine of Ehrenfest, here to learn to become proper nobles fit to serve Jurgenschmidt. May the future be bright, we said together. Once we had finished greeting Anastasius, he told us to raise our heads. We did so slowly, and when I saw the prince's face again, I noticed he was gazing down at me with a somewhat displeased frown. Huh? Excuse me? What are you displeased about? You just met the girl. Rosemine, was it? You are the so-called saint of... Oh, he's gotten word of this rumor now. Okay. So-called saint of Ehrenfest. The rumors claim you have unparalleled beauty and wisdom, enough mana to be adopted by an archduke, and a compassionate heart that moves even the stoniest of men to tears. How laughable. Must such reports always be so untrustworthy? What the heck? Since when has my reputation been that unreasonable? I'm more confused than anyone right now. It is often the case that time and distance distort the truth, I replied carefully. This is my first time hearing of any such rumors. I can only imagine there were jesters somewhere along that line who exaggerated things further for their own amusement. It was little wonder the other nobles were laughing at me as if they had heard all those rumors as well. The amount of praise was much too excessive for someone who looked young enough to have just recently been baptized. My attempt to brush aside the subject didn't seem to please Anastasius. Good grief, he said, not raising an unamused eyebrow. Ehrenfest must be in truly dire straits if they have no choice but to prop up such a middling girl as a saint. Hey! That is exactly correct, Princess Anastasius. Your wisdom truly does befit your status, I said with a smile, planning to stroke his ego and get this over with. As you know, Ehrenfest is a dearly lacking duchy with nothing of note. Our mana shortage is so great that the Archduke had no choice but to adopt me and build me up as a saint. Our situation is so dire, in fact, that we are hopelessly praying for the flowers we offered to the gods to perhaps return to us one day. Like you don't know it's your fault. We were a backwater duchy struggling to survive to begin with, and then you royals had your dumb civil war that caused so much damage that you had to steal mana from all your other duchies just to keep functioning. At least give back the priests you took for the sovereign temple. While complaining on the inside, I put a hand on my cheek and tilted my head in a generic worried pose. The sovereignty was probably carrying on just fine. They had compensated for their purge-induced mana shortage by taking nobles and priests from other duchies, who were now facing serious difficulties themselves as a result. It was annoying to be mocked by a member of the royal family that caused all the problems in the first place. They say you became a saint to bring order back to your duchy, but Ehrenfest hardly seems better off with you. In fact, were you not attacked by nobles of your duchy even? Oh, come on. Indeed, whether big or small, there is always some chaos following a shift in power. I am just glad I was the only victim. Anastasius raised an eyebrow again, then waved a bored hand in our direction. That was a sign for us to leave, so Wilfrid and I stood and excused ourselves. Whew, that went well. Good. We weren't done yet, though. If anything, that was only just the beginning. I pumped myself up and started approaching the other tables. The greater and middle duchies from ranks 1 through 5 were not on bad terms with Ehrenfest, so each greeting ended after the blessing and the exchange of a few polite words. Then it came time for Ehrenbach. The sixth. Detlinde welcomed us with a kind smile, looking exactly like Georgine. Oh no. Lady Detlinde, may we pray for a blessing in appreciation of the serendipitous meeting ordained by the harsh judgment of Abiglade, the god of life. You may. Once the blessings were finished, Detlinde smiled. I am delighted to finally meet you, Wilfried. You invited my mother to visit Ehrenfest 2 years ago, did you not? She was going to bring me with her. I was ever so excited to meet you for the first time. We children of archdukes are not offered many opportunities to visit families in other duchies, are we? She asked. The innocent smile on her face, plus the fact she was referring to Wilfried without any title, made it hard to tell whether she was treating him as close family or someone not even worth recognizing as a rival archduke candidate. Of course, the visit was sadly cancelled due to the attack on your family, she continued. I was devastated. We were cousins after all. I pray that we can at least be friendly together here at the Royal Academy. I pray for the same, Wilfried replied, a polite smile on his face. Detlinde's oath smile deepened. No need to be so formal. We are family. We rely on me whenever necessary. I am a fourth year and know much that can help you. She's a fourth year. That means she is 14. First year, okay. 10th is for 10th, 10, 11, 12, 13. No, she's 13. We are honored, Wilfried and I replied together. Detlinde put a hand on her cheek and tilted her head slightly. So, Wilfried, I am told that Rosemine was poisoned and forced to sleep within a Jereve. It is not always the case that the potions of one's parents will work for a child, and sleeping for 2 years straight is quite rare indeed. How is she doing? Is she well? It must have placed a lot of strain on her body, she said, but for all the worry in her voice, she didn't so much as glance in my direction. Rosemine is fine, Wilfried answered. As you can see, she has recovered enough to attend the academy without issue. Your kindness is much appreciated, Lady Detlinde. Detlinde, whatever. Thank you ever so much for worrying about me, Lady Detlinde. I have always been of poor health, so I am used to being bedridden, I added, but even so, I am fortunate enough to have already recovered. I see. Does this mean I will be able to visit Ehrenfest this summer, then? I would like to spend even more time with you, Wilfried. Uh-oh. It was then that I realized she wasn't affording me so much as a smile. Her attention was focused entirely on Wilfried. Okay, this is just too blatant. What's her goal here? Maybe she just doesn't like me, which is understandable enough, but it's possible that she's plotting something else? The only problem is, I have no idea how much she actually knows. Permission from Ob Ehrenfest is required before any nobles from another duchy can visit, so I cannot give no answer on my own. True. In that case, I hope you will convince him for me, Wilfried. Our greeting with Ehrenbach ended with me being entirely ignored, and from then we started moving in the next table. I thought things over as I stood up. So it seems that even the prince knows I was attacked by nobles from Ehrenfest. Just how much information has leaked exactly? Is it common knowledge throughout noble society that I was in a coma for the past 2 years? Or was Detlinde warning me that Ehrenbach knows absolutely everything that happened in our duchy? Well, I mean, more than likely, the former Veronica faction, aka the now Georgine faction, has probably leaked this information to Georgine, who now has told it to her daughter. So, more than likely, yeah. I had no answers to these questions, and so to avoid leaking any information myself, I decided to return any inquiries sent my way with vague smiles and ambiguous responses. The middle and lesser duchies holding ranks 7 through 12 were currently engaged in a brutal battle against Ehrenfest to preserve their position. As these ranks truly could turn on a dime, they met us with harsh words and spiteful insults, all commenting that they hadn't expected the Saint of Ehrenfest to be so tiny. Behind their sneers, however, it was clear they had been afraid of us overtaking them. As a result, seeing that I wasn't the saint they had feared actually came as a relief to them. I blew through the greetings with 3 set phrases powerful enough to handle whatever was thrown at me. As I am still recovering, there is not much I can do. Let us work to grow together, and I am glad to see that you consider me as an equal. I wasn't yet sure how much of an impact a change in the rankings would really have, but with how insulting the other duchies were being, I was feeling motivated to do my best and work my way up. Alright, time to take the Better Grades Committee seriously. Once we had finished greeting those above us, it was time for us to be greeted by the lower ranks. As expected, they also viewed us with hostility, including those from Fullmetal. Huh? From Fullmetal, the duchy to the west of Ehrenfest. They're supposed to be on good terms with Ehrenfest, isn't it? Frembeltag was currently 15th, lowest rank of any middle duchy. They had been on the losing side of the Civil War, and I recall that they had been in the middle of rebuilding themselves when I went into my coma. There had been 2 years where I helped to fill up their small chalices, and their rank was a clear indication that they were still struggling to get back on their feet. That may have something to do with me refusing to fill chalices from other duchies. Sylvester had been accepting chalices year after year, and so when winter came 3 years ago, I informed him that I would no longer be filling them going forward. On top of that, there was also my ending up in a coma. Even if Sylvester had accepted the chalices again, it was hard to imagine Ehrenfest having the capacity to help other duchies, when even Wilfrid and Charlotte had to rush around the central district refilling of mana. Frembeltag had no doubt fallen even further down the rankings due to losing this support. Lord Wilfrid, Lady Rosemine, may I pray for a blessing in appreciation of this serendipitous meeting, ordained by the harsh judgment of Abigail, the god of life. You may. I am Rudiger of Frembeltag, and I am a 5th-year student here at the Royal Academy. If you will excuse me saying so, Lord Wilfrid and I share much blood, owing to our parents being siblings, he said after kneeling down and blessing us. As one would expect, given his comment, Rudiger looked a lot like Wilfrid, so much so that they really could have been mistaken for brothers when standing next to each other. The two most notably shared the same hair color, though Rudiger also had the same indigo eyes as Charlotte. I pray that we can have a good relationship just as our parents do, Rudiger added, we feel the same. Once everyone had exchanged their greetings, the food was brought in. I would be eating with Hartmut, Cornelius, and Lenore. Brunhilde would serve me while Angelica stood guard. After taking my first bite, I pursed my lips and thought I had been expecting the cooking and the sovereignty to be more refined than what I was used to, since Ehrenfest was such a country province. But it just tasted like normal food. I could guess that the cuisine here was somewhat standardized, since all the duchies got together each year for the Royal Academy and the Archduke Conference. The food wasn't noticeably good, but it did use ingredients that weren't available in Ehrenfest. I was curious to know what else they had, though. I couldn't imagine this would be easy to find out, since I wasn't allowed to get to the food storage area. It tastes a bit unremarkable, I observed. A few years ago, I thought this was the most delicious food in the world, Hartmut replied with a wry smile. The food at the dormitory had changed 3 years ago and had only continued to improve since then, which was probably due to the chefs getting used to the new styles. Well, I suppose we shouldn't talk about the food too much, I said. We then started discussing the greetings, and Hartmut complimented me on how smoothly I changed the subject. There was a lot we needed to think about and discuss when it came to our relations with other duchies. But we couldn't talk about it here. We needed to wait until we returned to the dormitory. The fact that you have only recently awoken from your slumber is the perfect excuse to avoid post-meal socializing. You can remain seated this year. Leave the information gathering to me. Very well, Hartmut. I entrust this all to you. We started making plans as we continued our meal until eventually we were served dessert. Galettes with Rutrubs jam, plus cute little sweets in the shape of birds. The plates practically shone, and the presentation was perfect. Neither Hugo nor Ella had the artistic knack for decorating plates like this. The desserts looked so nice that I really wanted to take it back with me just so they could learn from it. Feels like a waste to actually eat it, I said, before taking a bite of the gelette. The flavors exploded in my mouth with such force that I jerked back in my seat at a complete loss for words. It wasn't that the food tasted good, rather the sweetness was offensively over the top. So much so that I couldn't manage another bite. Since sugar was considered an expensive luxury, it was clear the chefs had thought it best to use as much as possible. My mouth feels all gritty now. I sat down my cutlery and reached for my drink. There were a few mutters of at least the first bite or two tastes nice from those eating with me, but they were all making similar expressions. It just went to show that restraint was important in all things. Will my recipes truly catch on in the sovereignty, I asked, setting my cup down with a sigh. If they think this is delicious here, it might be more difficult than I thought. I believe it will, but it will take a considerable amount of time for the chefs to learn their techniques and master the flavors, Cornelius replied. Even the head chef of our estate had great difficulty. I nodded slowly. Cornelius was right that it would take some time for the chefs to get up to par once I spread the recipes, but did that mean that I would have to battle with this overbearing sweetness at every tea party I was invited to until then? Now that I'm even more scared of going to them. Spreading your recipes is a good idea, Lady Rosemine, but I think you should introduce them gradually, rather than all at once. Am I right to assume you know more than what is available in your recipe book? Hartmut asked with a raised eyebrow. It seemed as though he was testing me. I wiped my mouth and answered with a smile. Of course. There are some that I don't mind making public, some I am happy to share with Ehrenfest leaders, some I'm willing to share with my guardians, and some I would much rather keep to myself. I keep my public and private plans strictly separate, even when it comes to recipes. Hartmut's eyes started sparkling with interest. Then I am looking forward to learning about them, so how do you intend to establish your reputation as a saint here at the Royal Academy? There's no need for that. I wish to live a humble life as a normal student. If everyone was going to talk about how underwhelming a saint I was, and how much my reputation preceded me, then I wanted to go all the way and live out my school days as a normal student. My plan was to hide out in the library and spend as much time there as possible. Hartmut, however, seemed to disagree. He frowned at my response, then quickly forced a smile back onto his face. His expression looked calm on the surface, but it carried an intensity that made it clear there was no room for debate. Unfortunately, that is not an option, he said. The presence of a saint is absolutely necessary for increasing Ehrenfest's influence. Did I just flip some weird switch inside him? For some reason, Hartmut began exposing at length about his first encounter with the legend of my sainthood. Adelie had apparently brought him with her to see my baptism, then pointed up at me and explained that she would be serving me from now on. The young Hartmut had been ashamed to hear that his mother was serving someone who was not only a child, but an archnoble of the same status as them, even if said archnoble was about to be adopted by the Archduke. However, when you returned the blessing at your ceremony, blue light rained down upon the entire hall, covering all the attendees at once. It was the biggest blessing I had seen in my life, and the first time I've watched one had ever moved me. The first time that watching one had ever moved me, Hartmut explained, making it clear that this memory was deeply engraved in his heart. That was an evil plot concocted by my guardians, all part of a plan to force nobles to accept my adoption, I explained. You were fooled, Hartmut. They planted you like a harspiel. I am no saint. Your baptism is not the only reason I understand you are a true saint, Lady Rosemine. When autumn came and Hartmut heard from his mother about my desperate efforts to save Wolfried's future, his only thought had been that I should have used that opportunity to kick Wolfried down and become the Archduchess myself. He had maintained that he would have crushed Wolfried into the dirt had he been my retainer, then advised his mother on what to tell me, though she refused to pass the information on. Lady Rosemine does not wish for such a thing. She thinks only of raising others up, not dragging them down, she had told him. You would be better off coming with ways to strengthen the legend of her sainthood while improving the lives of those around her. And so I did just that, Hartmut said. In the end, however, seeing nothing I had thought up surpassed what Lord Ferdinand himself was already putting into motion. I don't even want to know what plans he concocted. Furthermore, your acts prove your sainthood more than anything else could, Lady Rosemine. I have not heard of anyone else giving a blessing simply by offering music to the gods as their winter debut. The light that shone from your fingers as you strummed the harpspiel was truly stunning in its beauty. Your blessing to Leidenschaft drifted slowly to the ceiling while spreading throughout the hall, remember? Did it? I was in such a panic over screwing up that I didn't really recall what happened. The only thing I could remember was being shocked at the sudden development and then Ferdinand forcibly carrying me out. I had been frantically trying to stop the blessing in its entirety, but I guess it hadn't looked that way to everyone else. It was from that point onward that I knew for sure you are a saint who has far surpassed even what Lord Ferdinand had planned. Hartmut concluded. I wish for everyone else to consider you as much of a saint as I do, and to that end I will spare no expense. My cheek twitched. Up to this point, I had thought of Hartmut as a mini justice with some common sense, but that couldn't have been further from the truth. He was genuinely skilled, which meant he had the power to accelerate the spread of my sainthood faster than I could ever hope to contain. Is it just me, or have I taken to someone as my retainer that I really shouldn't have? Okay, I'm going to have to end it off here, and I will see you all in the next one.